Welcome, you're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inabdar. The victory for India at the International Court of Justice is an important one. Not only is it a legal victory that displays the prowess of our legal team there, but it is also a diplomatic and moral one. The International Court of Justice ruled today that Pakistan would give India consular access to former naval officer Kulbhushan Jadhav, who has been in Pakistani custody for over 3 years. The court has also directed a review and reconsideration of the death sentence that a military court handed down to Kulbhushan Jadhav. The execution order is of course stayed. So what is the significance of this order and why is it important? We will look at this over the next 1 hour. Just to alert you, we will also be hearing from the man of the hour, noted lawyer Harish Salve, who led India's case at the ICJ ahead on the show. We'll be cutting across to a live press conference from him. I will also be speaking to top lawyer Abhishek Manu Singhvi. But first, let's start by telling you what the case is all about. Let's first look at the history of this case about Kulbhushan Jadhav.
The legal battle between India and Pakistan started on March 3, 2016 when Kulbhushan Jadhav, a former Indian Navy officer, was arrested by Pakistan, allegedly from Balochistan on suspicion of espionage and sabotage against Pakistan. India was quick to claim that Jadhav retired from the Navy and became a scrap dealer in Chabahar port, Iran, with no links with the Indian government, and he was kidnapped from Iran. Pakistan did not allow consular access to Jadhav despite repeated demands by India, and the Pakistani military court sentenced Jadhav to death, claiming he confessed to his crime. The execution stayed when India appealed at the International Court of Justice, where ace lawyer Harish Salve sought Jadhav's immediate release, citing a violation of Geneva Convention and that Jadhav's confession was extracted. Pakistan has claimed that they have sufficient proof of espionage. The ICJ began its deliberation after the public hearing concluded in February 2019. Finally, in a 15-1 majority, the ICJ has stayed Jadhav's execution and directed Pakistan to review trial besides allowing India consular access to Jadhav.
Now let's move ahead and speak with Madhav Das Gopalakrishnan, my colleague who is reporting this evening from The Hague. Madhav, tell us about the massive win for India and how it all played out.
We are absolutely right, Hina. This is a massive, massive win for India. It's virtually a unanimous verdict, and not just because it's 15-1, but because that one person who has dissented on several counts is Pakistan's own ad hoc judge Jilani. And therefore, that means that the bench that was already there has unanimously decided that A, Pakistan was in violation of the Vienna Convention by not giving consular access. B, the fact that they have immediately ordered consular access to be restored and that must be immediately done. And C, they have also, of course, stayed the entire death sentence until there is another judicial proceeding which establishes through the various provisions of law that there is due course that has been followed, which would ensure that there is no violation as far as the human rights or the upholding of the ICCPR is concerned. Very, very massive judgment, and all the arguments that Pakistan has made, whether it is about the admissibility, whether it is about the jurisdiction of the court, all of those arguments today stand absolutely redundant. Even the argument that was made forth by Pakistan that there are bilateral treaties, all those arguments also being thrown out the window. At the same time, very clearly have come out and said that at this point of time, the exception that Pakistan was choosing to make, saying that he was a spy and therefore does not apply as far as the Vienna Convention is concerned, all of those exceptions being very clearly and unequivocally ruled out by the International Court of Justice here at The Hague. So massive, massive day for India. It's a huge victory and a vindication as far as the Indian position is concerned here at the International Court of Justice at The Hague. Hina.
Right, thanks so much, Madhav Das Gopalakrishnan there. Now for more on the story, I'm going across to Michael Kugelman, Deputy Director of the Asia Program and Senior Associate for South Asia at the Wilson Center. But I'd like to describe Michael as someone who watches Pakistan and the relationship between India and Pakistan also very closely. Michael, great to have you on the show. I just want your perspective of what we've seen this evening.
Well, as was mentioned before, the very significant victory India. I mean, the major crux of India's claim brought to the ICJ was that Jadhav deserves consular access, and clearly the court has ruled that he should get that consular access. I think that's critical, and that's the bottom line. But you know, the interesting thing about the ICJ is that when it's ruled on cases involving India and Pakistan, it oftentimes tends to make decisions that allow each side to be able to declare victory. And certainly India can declare victory, but you know what? Pakistan's going to declare victory as well by saying that you know the court did not grant India's request to have him released or to have the military conviction in Pakistan annulled. So that's how Pakistan will declare victory. At the end of the day, both gets what it wanted, sort of. Both can claim victory. But I go back to what I said before. I mean, given that given the centrality of this consular access issue, and given the fact that India has been told that it should get that consular access, I think at the end of the day, this ended about as well as it could have ended for India.
A couple of points, Michael, that I would like to go through, and one of them, of course, is that effectively on the plea that you know, the military court's verdict should be overturned and Jadhav should come back to India, the International Court of Justice has not ruled on that. They possibly cannot even rule on that, but they have asked Pakistan to review the order and have left it to them to choose how to do so. What does this mean? How is this going to play out next?
Well, that's a good question. Ultimately, it's a political question, not a legal question. I think that, you know, we're talking about an international court here, and we all know that in international courts lack any semblance of an enforcement mechanism. So if Pakistan chooses not to do what the court suggests that it does, you know, Pakistan's not going to suffer in a big way, other than in terms of reputational factors. You know, Pakistan is not going to back down for sure. I mean, this is a critical case, and I think that for Pakistan, you know, this whole case is something that's allowed Pakistan to internationalize what it views as India's constant meddling in Pakistan and in the region, and it's not going to back away from this so easily. So, you know, I think that we can expect Pakistan to try to do everything it can. It's definitely not going to release him. That's not going to happen at all. And of course, the court has not asked for that to take place. But you know, I imagine Pakistan will continue to be pretty tough on this. Perhaps there would be pressure for some type of new trial. I don't know. But you know, Pakistan is going to do everything it can to make sure that this man is not able to be released or in a position where he could be released. Because again, this is a really critical issue for Pakistan, and it's not going to back down from it.
The court's orders are binding. If Pakistan doesn't choose to follow them, at the very least, there will be huge global condemnation, and they will have to at least give consular access, isn't it?
Absolutely, no. On the consular access issue, I think that's pretty clear that Pakistan really needs to should grant that request and that ruling from the court. But yes, I mean, you could talk about how the court's decisions are binding, but at the end of the day, as you suggest, the only way that Pakistan could suffer if it doesn't do what the court suggests it should do is on reputational levels. To be sure, Pakistan is very concerned about its global image. This has always been a big concern for Pakistan, particularly since its global image is not very good. And if Pakistan is seen as essentially thumbing its nose at a verdict from a major international court, then that certainly would not play well for its image. But again, for Pakistan, it has a very strong interest in doing everything it can to ensure that this person, you know, is not freed. And I imagine that they still would eventually want him to be executed. Clearly, that's not going to happen, at least not now that the death sentence has been suspended even more than it already had been. But you know, I'm not saying that Pakistan is simply going to do everything that the court suggests that it should do. At the end of the day, as important as reputational issues are, and as important as its global image is, it will do what it believes its interests dictate that it do. And Pakistan has said consistently that this is a spy and someone who is organizing acts of terrorism, and there's no reason why he should be out of prison anytime soon.
In a bit from now, we're going to hear from Harish Salve. Let me see if I can get audio from him. Let's just cut in and see.
The manner in which it intervened in this case, it protected Kulbhushan Jadhav, who was on death row, from being executed. in a hearing which was put together in a matter of days, and today it has delivered a judgment which has gladdened our hearts and once again restored the faith in the rule of law, in the International Court of Justice, and in the systems which we have, as mankind, put together to protect citizens of the world from state tyranny. We had challenged the conduct of Pakistan in its brazen refusal to adhere to the Vienna Convention and to allow consular access to an Indian. Pakistan all along sought to use the proceedings to make allegations against India of state-sponsored terrorism. It repeatedly played out slides of what it claimed were a passport it had recovered from Jadhav and asserted that India has to explain how this passport was put in place. Not only did the court not get drawn into this, but displaying this passport led to the court rejecting Pakistan's argument that Jadhav's nationality was uncertain. The court said, if you say that there was a passport which you recovered, true or false, the court says if you recovered a passport which you rely on and it was issued by India, you could have had no doubt that he was an Indian. Pakistan ran 3 preliminary objections. I will not bore you with the details. They were legalistic. But some of them may be of interest. In the course of its exchanges with India, where India repeatedly sought consular access, at one stage, based on the extracted confession, which Pakistan played over and over again in the international media, Pakistan told India that they had registered a first information report for those who in India had supported Jadhav in what they alleged was his conduct and his activities in Pakistan. The who's who of India's official term was named in that. And at one stage Pakistan claimed that if India were to allow that, then it would allow consular access. In the ICJ, Pakistan also ran the case that India has not cooperated in this investigation and therefore India should not be heard to complain of violation of the Vienna Convention. This argument has been rejected. I have a degree of personal satisfaction that a lot of adjectives were used by Pakistan in its submissions. Even in replying in the court, I characterized them as unfortunate, and I said it is my upbringing and India's tradition which stood in my way of replying to them in that language. Pakistan had based allegations of what we as lawyers call abuse of process and said that was another ground why India should not be allowed the relief it seeks. That has been rejected. The court has held that Pakistan is guilty of what it, and this is what I have written down when I was hearing the judgment, the court has held that Pakistan is guilty of internationally wrongful acts of a continuing character, and it must cease those acts. I think in the language of diplomacy, which is the language of the International Court of Justice, this is trenchant indictment. Personally, as a lawyer, I am delighted that the court has upheld our argument that while construing the Vienna Convention, the ICCPR, the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, must inform its interpretation. All this has led to the court giving us the final relief. We had ambitiously asked for annulment. The court said we can't annul, but they have said that Pakistan has to do everything to make the Vienna Convention right a living reality. They have to allow review and reconsideration. They have rejected the argument that clemency is a form of review and reconsideration. They have not accepted the argument that resort to judicial review in Pakistan courts is good enough. And that is why they have said that you must allow review and reconsideration. As I read the judgment, the critical point of review and reconsideration is that he has to be allowed consular access, he has to be allowed, and the review and reconsideration must take into account the potential prejudice caused to him, the implications of his evidence, and his right to defense. And it is only such review and reconsideration where we or our consulate will not only be allowed to meet him, discuss with him, see the papers, examine the evidence against him, but also arrange for his legal representation. And then there has to be a fair trial. Pakistan's Attorney General asserted that their constitution assures a fair trial. The court has said you must take all steps necessary. What steps you take are of your choice, respecting the sovereignty of Pakistan. But they have said this choice is not a free, unhindered choice. There is what they have used a nice phrase, they have said there's an obligation of result. And that result has to be a fair adjudication after allowing him consular access. And most tellingly, the court has said, you will take all steps necessary, including legislative measures. So Pakistan's repeated assertions that our existing laws are good enough and he can get nothing beyond has not been accepted. So I think I see this judgment with a sense of relief, a sense of gratification. And of course, they have said that till all this is done, there is no question of executing him. So I see this as something which we are very happy with, and I think it is now a good moment for us to help Jadhav get justice, ensure he has a fair trial, and since I know this is a question which all of you must be having in your mind, what if? The answer is, as in the other cases, the way the court judgment is, we can always go back to them if what they give is not a fair trial. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, sir, is this trial now carried out in the military court or does it have to be in the open court?
They have set a fair trial in accordance with the Pakistan Constitution. If it is back in the military court with the same rules where outside lawyers are not allowed, we are not allowed, access is not given, evidence is not given, it will not meet the standards. So either they will have to amend the military law, and they are laying themselves open to the challenge that that trial was not a fair trial as contemplated by the court. That's why I said I'm very gratified as a lawyer that the court has said that the ICCPR must inform the interpretation of the Vienna Convention. Pakistan took 3 months to notify us. First time over, the court has held that was a breach. And I would, as reading this judgment, I think if one were to be graceful, one would write tomorrow and say, please come and meet him.
So what is the force of this judgment? Because the understanding it's not binding and the court can't enforce it.
What makes you say it's not binding?
That's
Yeah, I know some people are suggesting. What do you mean by a binding judgment? Look, if the Supreme Court of India tomorrow were to give a judgment and the government says, I refuse to follow it, what can the Supreme Court do? The power of all the courts, as we say in our system, the courts have neither the power of the sword nor the power of the purse. Their power is the power of public opinion. If the ICJ verdict is disobeyed, we can take measures including by way of sanctions at the United Nations level. Now, I am sure Pakistan will not go that way, but if some country against whom a judgment is given wants to behave rogue, there are measures available. But I am sure Pakistan will not go down that road, or at least I hope so.
Sir, within the BBC, how big a victory do you perceive today's judgment to be, and what next for Mr. Jadhav, and can you secure his release, do you think?
The victory is a victory of the rule of law. And whenever the rule of law wins over state tyranny, I consider it personally, perhaps being a liberal at heart, to be a big victory. What next for Jadhav? The next for Jadhav is consular access. Hopefully we might even be able to secure, maybe I am being ambitious, secure a meeting with his family which is unhindered. And Jadhav protests his innocence. I am sure if it is a fair trial with the correct legal assistance, we will secure his release. And if the trial is not fair, we can go back and knock at the door of the ICJ.
Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, few hours back said that it's justice will be done with Kulbhushan. Do you think it's a beginning?
And a big beginning at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Salvi, if Mr. Jadhav is allowed council access, would it be you continuing to present him?
Consular access is by the consulate officials. They will go, they will meet him, his defense will be arranged. I don't think I have the right to audience either as an English barrister or as an Indian senior counsel in Pakistani courts. But I'm sure there are fantastic lawyers in Pakistan who will take up his cause.
Sir, Danish Khan from Times Now. There is also this point that Pakistan was trying to make that as Jadhav was supposed to be a spy, the Vienna Convention does not apply. And I think the court has also spoken a bit about that. If you could just throw some more light on that aspect.
Yes, Pakistan, it was one of the main arguments that a spy is not allowed consular access. We relied on the fundamental principle that the more serious the allegations, the greater the need for procedural safeguards. Secondly, at this stage, all that the court has to see are allegations of being a spy. What is in question is the process by which you will prove whether he is or is not guilty of the misdemeanors for which he is being charged. So the court came to the conclusion that on first principles, there is nothing which in the language of the Vienna Convention excludes this. Surprisingly, Pakistan referred to the Travaux Préparatoire, the underlying papers. We pointed out in those underlying papers the issue of a exclusion for espionage had been raised.
Alway there addressing the media, of course, after that spectacular win and making some very important points there. I'm joined now by another noted lawyer, Abhishek Manu Singhvi. Mr. Singhvi, thank you for joining us on the show this evening. Can you hear me, sir?
I can't hear you, madam.
Okay.
Your voice is not clear.
I will try and be louder.
It's totally distorted.
This is Tamanna here. Thank you for speaking with us. My first question to you, sir, is if you can give us an idea of the significance of this judgment from a legal, diplomatic and moral victory for India.
If you are talking of the Jadhav case,
yes,
let me tell you and allow me a couple of minutes. It's a great victory for India. It's a great day for India. And I'm extremely happy. Please don't politicize it. Everything is not politics. A court judgment is a team effort. There is no Indian who would not want Jadhav to be free. There is no Indian who would not want ICJ to be won. So let us all join in applauding and being happy. And this is a team effort, it's a continuous effort, it's a long-term effort. Secondly, I want to be particularly happy about the fact that 15 out of the 16 judges have upheld our jurisdictional view. It is not merely a victory. Across the globe, across geographical and cultural regions, we have a great diversity on the bench, and almost, in fact, I would say it's unanimous, because except for a Pakistan appointee judge, and that too an ad hoc judge, everybody is held one way. Thirdly, I think, as I had said earlier when the case started, India should not and did not argue the merits. It's a trap to say you are innocent, I am guilty, I am innocent, you are guilty, this evidence, that passport, that man. It's all ridiculous. This is not a trial court proceeding in the ICJ. The right thing to have argued always, and I have said so earlier before the proceeding started, is simple. You have a Vienna Convention, it applies to you. Have you followed all the, not only consular access, all the regulations, all the requirements of it, which means, of course, consular access, proper communication, proper sitting in a room and consulting with your High Commission, having lawyers, some transparency, knowing your charges, etc., etc. Now, that is a jurisdictional error which Pakistan has done, and I am so happy that the ICJ has rightly held it so. I think it's a good thing that Pakistan, despite running its preliminary objections, did not turn into a rogue nation as far as non-participation is concerned. I am happy that Pakistan is not considering ignoring the judgment. Obviously, it is highly misleading and distorted for Pakistan, as I have seen somewhere today, to suggest that it's won a great victory. That would be like a Ghalib's, ख्वाबों, अच्छा है ख्याल ख्वाबों के लिए. It would be really living in cuckoo land. But the road ahead still stretches. There will be a consular access sessions, multiple sessions. His rights will be revealed, and then ultimately the inexorable consequence of that will have to be a retrial.
Okay, Mr. Singhvi, I hope you can hear me.
Because none of this is done. Therefore, the trial is not a valid one.
Exactly. I hope you can hear me now, and I don't think you can hear
much better.
I don't think you could hear my first question because it wasn't a political one at all. I think you were responding in lieu of some of the questions you've perhaps been asked before. I'm asking you a purely legal one. Now, we were listening to Mr. Harish Salve just a few minutes before you came on the program, and he did say that if there is a trial in Pakistan which is not fair and free as has been hoped, the other option we have is to go back to the ICJ. Considering Pakistan has tried to make this an issue and tried to prove a point by claiming Mr. Jadhav is an Indian spy, do you think that this will eventually go back to the ICJ, or is there another back channel diplomatic route that we can use to see this through? Because the eventual aim is to get Mr. Jadhav back home.
Well, the short point is, your second point has to be done first, failing which we have to go to the first point. It's obvious. If Pakistan says, okay, we've lost, now we'll achieve the same result which we could not achieve by winning, by indirect means, by doing the same thing, surreptitiously, clandestinely, illegally, arbitrarily. Well, apart from international diplomatic mud on its face, there is still a problem of sovereignty. And India cannot easily, intervene if it becomes such a rogue nation on this issue. So first and foremost, I don't think Pakistan would go to that extent. I think diplomatic back channel talks will hopefully sort it out and he will emerge a free man. But secondly, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind, and it should be an obvious natural invocation, we'll go running all the way back to the ICJ if we find all the adjectives I've used, that they are obstinate, that they are trying to achieve indirectly what they could not achieve directly, etc., etc. And I think that will be a good case before the ICJ to say that the natural corollaries and consequences of all this access mean a retrial, a actual retrial, a fair retrial, not just in name, before transparency methodologies, and then let the ICJ take a decision. But I believe firmly there is no point insulting Pakistan without giving them the chance of the back channel diplomacy.
Yeah.
After all, Abhinandan was the result of back channel diplomacy. Countries realize that anybody can be in a position tomorrow like that. So just being obstacle for the sake of obstinacy is not a good idea. So I have hopes, and that's a much better solution than letting him languish for another few years till we fight ICJ. But certainly if that doesn't work, ICJ will be gone, should be gone, and I'm sure we will have a positive case there.
Just a follow-up question on back channel diplomacy, and you gave us an interesting example with Captain Abhinandan, Wing Commander Abhinandan, of course. This case, do you think it will be a little trickier because Pakistan has used this case to corroborate a lot of conspiracy theories that they've been floating through the years about espionage, etc., being perpetrated by India? So is there any kind of a middle path or a fig leaf they can find to then actually hand him over?
Well, I think it's naive for any of us to suppose that it will be easy. Yeah. In these matters, there are pretenses to be kept, escape routes to be kept. There are issues about countries' prestige and humiliation. So first and foremost, it will be counterintuitive for us to try and paint Pakistan into a corner when we start this second process. If we keep berating Pakistan for this, well, they have nothing to lose by being more stiff on Jadhav. Number two, if in the middle of virtually a warlike situation, Abhinandan could be released, then I think a proper handling, and it will require certainly a lot of diplomatic finesse. I mean, I think it should not be just left to some, clumsy approaches. It has to be diplomatic finesse. But there is no reason to be defeatist and negative because Pakistan has good grounds to generate goodwill. There are so many other bargaining points it has with India. So there is hope, a lot of hope there. And we should extend it, exploit it to the fullest. It's only when it's absolutely not possible that we should go for the other option of going to ICJ. There's no doubt in my mind.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, for speaking with us this evening. Noted lawyer, adding his point of view. Now, in the beginning of the show, I made 3 points that this is a legal victory, absolutely, and you heard from Harish Salve and Abhishek Manu Singhvi explaining why. It's a diplomatic victory and a moral one. I want to come back to Michael Kugelman on the last 2 points that I was making. And Michael, give us a perspective of how this looks on the world stage, because India has had a lot of backing in the recent past in terms of its positioning with Pakistan, whether it's the United States. Michael, if I can have him on the screen, please. Whether it's positioning with the United States, and United States now agreeing that Pakistan is a rogue state, cutting down funding, the kind of backing we got during the whole Balakot situation and that crisis as well. Do you think that this win adds another feather in the cap and bolsters that international standing that India has been enjoying?
Well, I do think you hit on an important point, because the fact that the verdict was in India's favor by saying that he should be granted consular access, I think that underscores a very notable trend that we've seen in recent years, and that is that the international community has largely sided with India in different India-Pakistan disputes. I mean, we saw this earlier this year when we had the crisis with Pulwama and Balakot, that it seemed like just about every world capital in the world came out and condemned Pakistan for its terrorism problem. Very few capitals, very few international organizations were calling for India to deal with its Kashmir problem. So I think that's one example. And this is important, I would think, for an Indian state and an Indian government that wants to be seen increasingly as a responsible, growing world power. You want the international community not just to sympathize with you, but to side with you, particularly when you are in your disputes with your longtime rival, Pakistan. So absolutely, I think that's true. But go back to what I said at the beginning of your show, that Pakistan will certainly find ways to spin this to serve its own purposes by saying that it also gets a victory simply because the ICJ did not agree to India's request for Jadhav to be released and for the military trial conviction to be annulled. So, it's all relative. But bottom line, yes, absolutely. I think that this decision, this ICJ decision, will really amplify this relatively recent trend of the international community and international organs really providing support to India in the broader context of India-Pakistan tensions and India-Pakistan disputes.
Absolutely. Michael, thank you for all of those inputs. We're going to take a very short break here on this India Development Debate special show. We're talking about the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. We're telling you why it's important and what impact it will have, far-reaching consequences. I'm coming back with another fresh set of panelists to give us more angles to the story. Don't go away. I'm joined now by Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the United States, Tilak Devashir, the former Special Secretary, Government of India, and Sushant Sareen, Strategic Affairs expert, and of course Senior Fellow at ORF. Welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us. Let me go to Sushant. Sushant, this is a case that I know you have followed very closely, and just listening to, of course, the Chief Justice of that court, the President, Justice Yusuf's reading out of the order, the main contentions that Pakistan put forth in terms of legal arguments were rejected. We will now get consular access. We need to understand what this means for the dynamics between the two countries and also India's standing on the world stage.
Look, I don't know about India standing in the world stage, but I think as far as this particular case goes, it's a I keep saying this, it's a slam dunk in India's favor. Virtually every single prayer which Mr. Harish Salve had put forward has been accepted, and virtually every single contention which the Pakistanis has made had made before the court has been demolished, brick by brick by the judgment. If you read the detailed judgment or you hear it, it's very clear. So that is one. But in substantive terms, what it means is that the court has stayed any kind of carrying out of the execution of Mr. Jadhav. They have asked the Pakistani government to review and reconsider the sentencing, which effectively means that they have questioned the credibility of the legal processes under which Mr. Jadhav was sentenced. For the Pakistanis to now go back and say that, look, okay, fine, we have reviewed and reconsidered it and we stick to the old thing, I don't think that is going to be possible. They will have to probably retry Mr. Jadhav, and in an open court. It's another matter that even a civilian court or an anti-terrorist court in Pakistan is a kangaroo court. We've seen what happened in Nawaz Sharif's case, that entire legal scandal, or judicial scandal, which is unfolding before our eyes, where judges are intimidated, they are blackmailed, and judgments which the deep state want are extracted out of them. So, but even so, if it goes to an open court, then given the fact that the ICJ has accepted India's request for consular access and given complete and unfettered consular access to the Indian side, which means that we can mount a legal defense for Mr. Jadhav, we can get to know what exactly happened, and we don't have to fall for the kind of nonsense which the Pakistanis have been feeding the rest of the world. More importantly, if this matter goes into open court, then a lot of the kind of stuff which the Pakistanis trying to peddle to pin on Mr. Jadhav will start getting exposed layer by layer.
1 minute.
For example, even when the initial reports came out, it was said that
Yeah.
No, let me just finish this.
Yeah.
So okay, I don't want to get into details, but a lot of that stuff which they said will start getting exposed, which will actually tell upon the Pakistani judicial system. But ultimately, and I think this is important, this matter will be resolved not through legal channels, not through public diplomacy. It will be resolved on the back channel.
Yeah.
It will be resolved by deal making between Mr. Deveshwar's organization and their counterparts in Pakistan, or at the governmental level. And finally, there will be some kind of political gestures will be made. All sorts of other things will happen before Mr. Jadhav finally comes back home.
Yeah.
So yes, a long way to still go forward. But I think a resounding victory for India today.
Absolutely, you've summed it up well, and especially the point that, you know, between what is happening today and between Kulbhushan Jadhav actually coming home, it may take some time. But what is the messaging? Meera Shankar, my question to you essentially is what this means for India-Pakistan relations as well, because the prestige of this verdict going in India's favour at the International Court of Justice, the kind of embarrassment Pakistan's legal framework now has had to face. Do you think these will have a deeper impact on the relationship and at a diplomatic level?
I think we have to wait and see how things go, because the verdict that India should be allowed unfettered consular access to Mr. Jadhav, and I think that itself will enable us to get to know more about Mr. Jadhav's point of view on the case. Secondly, if there is an open trial in a civilian court, then remedies for legal defense will also be available. But having said that, the Pakistan court system has been known to also accept nudges from the military on many occasions, as we've seen, you know, when they have, through the doctrine of necessity, regularized martial law imposed by different rulers in Pakistan, or the recent case about Nawaz Sharif's trial, where one judge declared that he had been put under pressure, and so on. So I'm not sure that trial in an open court will ensure a fair trial to Mr. Jadhav. It can also be used to whip up political emotions on the other side. So I think that back channel contacts and diplomacy will be very important in seeking a resolution. Now, the important thing is that Mr. Imran Khan has also been trying to send signals that he is responsible and you know, sagacious leader. For instance, after the Pulwama strike and the Balakot strike, that he released Wing Commander Abhinandan, and more recently we've seen the reopening of the airspace and the arrest of Pakistani airspace for Indian planes, and the arrest of Hafiz Saeed. Now, whether these are all smoke and mirrors, especially the arrest, whether these are smoke and mirrors as we've seen in the past, or it means that there is a conscious effort to change, I think the jury is still out. It's early days. We have to wait and see what the pattern of Pakistani behavior will be following this.
I think
you know, if
I
think we should at least see what the possibilities are through back channel diplomatic contacts.
Absolutely, that's a point Sushant made earlier as well. I just want to come to one point. The final conclusion of the judgment is in 8 points. Out of these 8 points, 7 of the 8 have been decided by 15:1. Only one of them is unanimous, and one of them, which is the important one, because this is what is open to interpretation now from the other side, is where the court finds that the appropriate reparation in this case consists of in the obligation of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan to provide, by the means of its own choosing, effective review and reconsideration of the conviction and sentence of Mr. Kulbhushan Jadhav, so as to ensure that the full weight is given to the effect of the violation of the rights set forth in. Mr. Tilak, let me come to you with this particular question. Essentially, ICJ has put the ball back in the court of Pakistan. What India would have wanted, and what the best case scenario would be, that they overturn the ruling of this military court and ensure safe passage of Kulbhushan Jadhav back to India. But they're saying, okay, you look at it, review it and figure it out. The point made earlier by the other panelists, can we trust Pakistan to do that in a fair and transparent manner?
You see, I don't think so. The ICJ had any other option. It's not a court of appeal. It didn't go into the merits of the case.
Yeah.
So all it went into was whether the legality of India's argument that Pakistan has violated the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, and it found that Pakistan had violated. Everything else follows from that. Now, the legality of the case itself, the merits and the demerits and the legal arguments, I don't think so the ICJ really went into that. It wasn't argued, certainly. You know, I think for India, one of the really crucial points to be able to press now, the whole case rests on his being arrested in Balochistan and then his further confessions, forced confessions, to prove that he was actually picked up from Iran, kidnapped from Iran, sold to Pakistan. And I think there is Pakistani media itself. There have been reports earlier, and which we need to sort of get together, to say that he was kidnapped from Iran, and they have been identified the commander of the Jaish-e-Adal, person by the name of Umar Baloch Irani, who had actually kidnapped him and sold him to the ISI. So that, I think, will really determine the further process of the case. I don't think so the ICJ could have annulled the judgment and set him really free, because, as I mentioned, it is not really a court of appeal or a court of looking at the merits of the particular case. Now, this is what Pakistani people, if you look at Twitter, are really going to town with. That, it didn't annul it wasn't meant to. The fact of the matter is that Pakistan said that ICJ has no jurisdiction. ICJ upturned that. It said that India's case is not admissible. It threw it out. That India's case is certainly admissible, and that it was in violation of the Vienna Convention. These are three major victories as far as India is concerned, and the continuing stay on the death penalty. So at least for the moment, Mr. Jadhav is safe, and that should be a big sigh of relief for all of us who are concerned about his welfare.
Absolutely. But let me come to the basic point you raised as well, Mr. Tilak, and I'm coming to Sushant with that question, is about the two different versions. Now, all through this process over the last 3 years or so, there have been two different versions. Pakistan has been keen to push their narrative, saying that Mr. Jadhav is a spy and he was coming in for espionage, etc., because they want to echo a lot of conspiracy theories they've been floating over the last many decades. India, of course, has refuted that on various forums and in this court as well. What happens to that story? Does this go back and play out in a Pakistani civilian court or another Pakistani criminal court next?
No, I think the civilian in the whatever other court there is, I think that is a sideshow. The point is that the Pakistanis have, in a sense, milked Mr. Jadhav for whatever it is worth over the last 3 years or so. They've virtually gone to town over this. They've tried to, drop his name at every instance, and that's what they've been doing. So I don't think there's any more traction left in Mr. Jadhav, in the sense that what you wanted to do, you've already done, and then there are these kind of deals made on the back channel. There's the famous Gary Powers case between the US and the Americans. So those kind of things keep happening between countries. Now, what will be at what point will a deal be struck? What will be the the contours of that deal? It's difficult for me to speculate on that, but I think that's the trajectory. On the other hand, politically, it becomes a bit of a hot potato, because here was this Prime Minister of Pakistan, although he's famous for U-turns and he thinks making U-turns is the hallmark of a visionary leader. But here is this man who, while in opposition, used to take pot shots at the then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif on the Jadhav case. For him to now be seen to be doing a deal, on the back channel to release Mr. Jadhav is not going to be that easy, because now the political opposition is going to give him a treatment, a taste of his own medicine. that is one part of the problem. The second part of the problem is going to be the legal system in Pakistan, and as my colleagues have said that that's already its credibility is under grave doubt. Even so, when this goes into an open court and matters are argued in an open court and there's cross-examination of witnesses and documents have to be presented, that is when the whole thing starts unraveling. So, whatever evidence is, you just simply can't convict a guy on a forced confession in a military camp under torture, under duress, and say that, okay, fine, he's admitted to everything. That's not going to wash down anybody's throat. And finally, I think it is extremely important for everybody to understand, even if this case had not gone our way, it is my belief that nothing would have happened to Mr. Jadhav, simply because that the Pakistanis cannot afford to execute a man like him and then hope that there will be no repercussions on India-Pakistan relations. So clearly they are going to be playing the game of brinkmanship. They will try and
I don't know.
But they're not going to go over that.
Okay, let me get more views on that, because the fact is that India moved the ICJ on the 8th of May for this very reason, because we wanted to stop any chance of execution of Kulbhushan Jadhav. That was our trigger. We managed to attain that. We've managed to keep that status quo for the last 2.5 years, and from now here on. Meera Shankar, where do you come in on that point? And also on the point of these back channel talks, if Pakistan has gone to town saying that this man is a spy, what is the spin with which they can now release him?
Well, there are deals which are struck, on these issues. So I think it's not really for me to speculate on what kind of possible deals, but that would be really the way forward. Yes, I think it's good that the death penalty has been stayed, because, it's possible if the death penalty had been executed, then we would have all been talking about abstractions. So I think it's good that there's a stay on the death penalty and that continues. The legal system in Pakistan, I think, is really weak. To pin our hopes on that, I think, might be difficult. I'm not so sanguine about the opposition in Pakistan right now, because most opposition leaders are in jail, and their ability to really mount a major kind of movement, should any deal be struck, might be less robust than it would have been had they been out. Nawaz Sharif, his brother, then Zardari. I mean, all these people are in jail. And quite often in the past, when there have been so-called movements in Pakistan, they've had the blessings of the army to really, take off. So I don't see that happening, because I think Prime Minister Imran Khan is still, in the good books of the military there. So I'm not really sure about the ability of the opposition to use this as a peg, and that therefore becoming a hindrance in striking a deal. But I think first the the repercussions or implications of this judgment will have to be digested within Pakistan before we move on to any kind of next step, and that's why it's important that the death penalty stay continues.
That is one way that we have to see how Pakistan takes this forward. The other point, of course, and I'm going to come to Mr. Tilak on this. I know Sushant wants to come in, but Mr. Tilak, I want your view on this. Is the ICJ's orders are not necessarily binding. There has been precedents where countries have just not followed. Considering Pakistan has fought this case legally and failed, but fought it nevertheless, do you think there's any chance of that happening, or they will take this on board and there won't be any kind of misadventure there?
You see, the judgments of the ICJ are binding. There has to be no sort of two opinions on that. They may not be enforced, like the cases of the United States where they didn't, did not enforce. So the judgment is binding. It's binding on both India and in Pakistan, and Pakistan will really have to go out of its way to say that they will not enforce, or they will refuse to give consular access anymore. I don't put it past Pakistan, but I'll be surprised if they do that in the face of the overwhelming 15-1 judgment on this particular issue. So Pakistan is unlikely to not enforce it. But in case if it wants to, it can certainly do so. But I think the really sort of important point is that where does Pakistan go from here? They can stall giving consular access for a while.
Absolutely.
There's no timetable laid down by when do they have to give consular access. They can stall, they can see which way the sort of wind is blowing, what are the international community doing. But India has to continue. In fact, let me also say this now, that since 2017, I think compliments are due to the Ministry of External Affairs for the kind of dedication and single-minded purposes with which they have pursued this case and kept the pressure on Pakistan to make sure that, by asking for consular access, putting together a watertight case, getting a very good legal team, which India's case was argued. And so, in a similar manner, the MEA will have to continue putting pressure on Pakistan to ensure that consular access is actually given. And the modalities of the consular access too will have to be worked out, in such a manner that the consular officers are able to meet Yadav by themselves, so to be able to talk freely and frankly and explain exactly what happened, and then get him a proper legal team.
No, since you spoke about India's outstanding efforts, I think we must make a mention here of Senior Counsel Harish Salve, who has spearheaded, those legal efforts, and kudos to him and the way he's taken it forward. In fact, we will be hopefully hearing from him later, so do tune in to India Development Debate between 9 and 10. We'll have a lot more on the story for you. But Sushant, you wanted to come in on the point, and I also want you to add to the perspective that Mr. Tilak just took forward. Where does Pakistan go from here? Effectively, unfortunately and effectively, we've won this legal battle. It's been a diplomatic moral victory, but the ball is in their court for the next steps. They're the ones who have to now give us consular access. They're the ones who have to review this judgment and take it to another court and figure out what to do.
So here is the thing, Tamanna. Number one, I think you spoke about precedents of people not observing the ICJ judgments. The countries which didn't observe are countries like the United States, and I don't think Pakistan is quite United States in terms of its power, in terms of its wealth, in terms of everything else, in terms of its influence, and in terms of its ability to cock a snook at the rest of the world. There is American exceptionalism, there is no Pakistani exceptionalism, much as they would like one. That is point number one. So, for the Pakistanis to now say that they don't accept this judgment, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't think they can afford it, not in the kind of hole they find themselves in. Secondly, they could do what the Pakistanis do best, which is that say, okay, fine, we've reviewed the judgment and all of that, and we don't think we stick to what the military courts had announced, and we'll carry out the sentence, which is why I keep saying that they cannot carry out this sentence, because now Jadhav's case is not just the case of any ordinary person. It's become a cause célèbre. And for the Pakistanis to now carry out this kind of a sentence, they will have to then factor in the kind of repercussions and far-reaching repercussions it will have on India-Pakistan relations. And frankly, any hope anybody harbors that the two countries might be getting back together and engaging at some level or the other, I think that's going to be shot down. So I don't think that's an option again available. They'll probably continue doing what they do best, which is carry out a bit of a propaganda war, but that's not going to go down very well, at least that's my estimate. And finally, on the issue of the Pakistani opposition, see, it's not a question that the Pakistani opposition is going to mount a movement against the government if it was to enter into some kind of a deal. In fact, if the deal is going to be worked out, the Pakistani opposition will have been told by the military, which will actually work out the deal, to pipe down on this issue. Yet, the Pakistani opposition will use this as a political handle to beat Imran Khan with. And that is going to be a price that Imran Khan will have to pay if some deal happens during his tenure. Now, we don't know how long Imran Khan is going to last, whether another 6 months, 1 year, the whole term. or maybe tomorrow he might be sacked.
Yeah.
Because there is some talk, although it's satire, but that's Pakistani satire, that
frankly,
instead
beyond
of
a point.
Imran Khan giving Bajwa an extension,
Yeah.
Bajwa is giving Imran Khan an extension.
Yeah. No, frankly, the internal workings of Pakistani politics is not of concern today, and we'll have to wait and see. But it does possibly affect what happens next to Kulbhushan Jadhav. Huge moral victory, huge legal victory, diplomatic victory as well. Will it turn into the kind of potent victory when Mr. Jadhav actually walks back home and into India? That's the question. We thank all of you for joining us on this special edition of the India Development Debate. We're leaving you with some pictures of celebrations as well as this verdict is announced.